As I was growing up, I was in a church that believed that they had the right answer for every question. And I remember spending every Saturday morning for 2 years memorizing Martin Luther's small catechism and coming to be tested on how well I knew it, as well as my peers who were in my confirmation class. This was the word. This was the truth. This was the real deal. This is what you believe. When I was in college, I began to question, in studying science and evolution, the idea of creation in 144 hours. I began to question a number of things, but it wasn't the kind of thing I could talk about. And then I was on the debate team in college, and a book by Thomas Altizer, The Death of God, came out in my second year. And we decided to have a debate, resolved that God is dead, and they knew I was heading towards seminary, so they teamed me up with an Episcopal priest named John Mangrum. He was the rector of a church in Tampa. And we got together beforehand, and he said, look, the burden of proof is on the affirmative. We're the negative. We really don't have to do much. We can take a position of reverent agnosticism. We can't prove it one way or the other, but we choose to believe. We choose to engage. We won the debate. And when my father had taken a call to a church in Georgia before I finished my sophomore year, I stayed back in Tampa. And I went to Father Mangrum's church. I was impressed with the liturgy. I was impressed with the preaching. I was impressed with everything about it. And that was the beginning of my path towards the Episcopal Church. My doubts could be embraced. We could have conversations about matters of faith without it just being, there's one answer, and that's it. When my wife, Rebecca, was meeting with the assistant at Holy Trinity as she was thinking about joining, she had a whole series of questions. And she told me that afterwards, he basically said, well, you could believe this, but then again, you could believe that. And it seemed like for every question that he had, he was giving her options. And she said that was quite a sales pitch. And she wasn't sure what to do with it because it was like the tent was big enough that anything could be embraced. I remember one Sunday where a parishioner came up to me and the rector and said, how many sacraments are there in the Episcopal Church? And simultaneously, he said 2, and I said 7, and we were both right. If you look up the Book of Common Prayer, it's available online, and go to the Catechism. It talks about 2 major sacraments and 5 sacramental actions. And so individuals in the time of Elizabeth could come together in faith, or begin to come together in faith, when you think about all of the warring between Protestants and Catholics in those days. To say it's possible for us to be together. It's possible to worship together. We don't have to be lockstep in any particular way of believing. We can find our own path. And that, to me, is a wonderful thing, because when we talk about belief, the opposite of belief really is not doubt. Paul Tillich, an American theologian, wrote about the dynamics of faith and said the opposite of faith is really anxiety. It's not doubt. Doubt is part of faith. One has to work through the doubts in order to say, I believe. Anxiety is something different. Anxiety impacts relationships. Because ultimately what we say in the creed is not I believe that. but I believe in. It is about affirming relationship, a relationship that starts with baptism and travels through our lives as we walk with God. To me, the beautiful part of the story is the response of Jesus. Because when he sees Thomas, he opens his hands in embrace. He opens his hands in invitation. The love of God embraces Thomas, even though he had had doubts. And that, to me, is an important piece for all of us in what we do. Because in going into relationships, there can be a certain amount of anxiety, there can be a certain amount of doubt that marriage is considered a sacramental action in the Episcopal Church because it's a symbol of the relationship between Christ and church, between Christ and Christian. There can be a sense in those relationships of good times and bad times, of doubts and affirmations. But in the process of moving through the process of being baptized, which is a day by day by day event, we think about the history that we share, where we might start a relationship, a marriage with a certain level of anxiety. Is this going to work? Is everything going to be okay? We're moving into a different status. But the more we share history together, the more we work through issues, we work through conflicts, we celebrate events, the more history we have, the stronger the relationship becomes. And so we remember the history of God and God's people to affirm the relationship, to strengthen our walk with God. A walk with God that can include doubt, that can include uncertainty. And know that we, like Thomas, will be embraced when we, like Thomas, say, "My Lord and my God." Amen.